All right, guys. So I got Jake here. He's been working with us for some time. I'm super excited to bring him on. I want to get a little bit of a understanding of like where he came from, where he was at prior to working with us, a little bit on his background, his journey into the Airbnb space, and obviously the time being that we've worked with him. So, Jake, go ahead, introduce yourself, kind of give a little bit of background knowledge on what you were doing prior, some hobbies, and a little bit about your personal self.
What's going on, everybody? Like Aurelio said, I'm Jake. I've been working with the program coming up on a year now in December. I launched my first two units simultaneously in March of this year. So I've been operating for about 9 months now. So a little bit about me before I got into this, I had a mobile car detailing business. I ran that for just under a year, but it just wasn't for me. And I had always been interested in the Airbnb arbitrage as a whole, but just honestly didn't know where to start. I was pretty intimidated and felt like a service-based business would be, a better way to dip my feet into entrepreneurship. And then I stumbled upon Aurelio's program, and there automatically was that trust there because I knew him personally. So, like I said, about a year ago, joined onto the program, went through all the modules, and just like that, was able to land two properties, and it's been off to the races ever since.
Yeah, heck yeah. I know, Jake, that like you kind of always had this like entrepreneurial mindset, prior to working with us. Like you said, you had the detailing business and things of that sort. I guess like discuss a little bit more on like what you were doing prior to working with us, like before you even got into Airbnb. Talk a little bit more upon like what you were currently doing, the jobs you were operating or working as, and like discuss a little bit about that.
Yeah, so even before the detailing came into the picture, I was working at a restaurant doing about 65 hours a week, just an assistant manager role. It was good money, but kind of led me into looking more into business itself rather than working for a business and wanting to have something of my own. I have nothing against working long hours, around the clock, but when you're doing that, you kind of want to own a piece of it. You don't want to be, always feeding somebody else's pockets. So just after a while of doing that, wanted to, start up my own thing.
Yeah, 100%. And I guess for you, like, what was like the turning point for you? Because like, obviously, still as an entrepreneur, like you're doing extremely well right now, right? And like you have 10 properties, but obviously you are putting work into growing and sharpening iron anywhere parts of the business, whether it's the foundation with employees or scaling, getting more properties. So what was really that turning point for you that made you kind of just be like, hey, you know what? Like, I need to get into something and I need to kind of step into the unknown and actually build that foundation for yourself and kind of get a piece of something like you mentioned.
It's a great question. I guess I would say, honestly, just being tied to a schedule, like always
Mm,
having to report somewhere at a specific time and follow somebody else's rules kind of made me turn that corner to, wanting to have something where I'm in control. And, like I said, I had the detailing business, but that kind of opened my eyes to there's a huge difference between running a business and working, in the business. So,
mhm.
working in the business, having to schedule jobs, get clients, market, do financials, all of that, and have to fill the jobs, clean the cars out in the cold and the heat, things like
Yeah.
that. So that really drew me into the Airbnb program where, it's still a ton of work. There's a big misconception that it's not, it's very passive, which it can be, but that's long time down the road.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because I think like so many people have this perspective of, I want to be a business owner, I want to own a business and like actually start my entrepreneur journey. And then they find themselves kind of staying stuck inside their business, right? As like an employer, right? They don't really find a way to pull themselves out or buy their time back, even as a business owner. And I feel like you kind of had a really good perceptive or perception, let's say, as far as what that was like on the detailing side of things, right? You were, like you said, you were cleaning cars in the cold, you were running the finances part of it. You were pretty much still working as an employee, even though you were a business owner. You know what I mean? And so many people have that like that viewpoint on entrepreneurs, like, oh, you could just start a business and like only spend, 5, 10 hours a week. When it's really not that way. Like you gotta put systems, teams, operations, automations in place. So tell me a little bit about like the differences between what you've learned from like the detailing business and like operating literally everything as like a solo business owner compared to what it's like running an Airbnb arbitrage business now having all these systems and teams in place. Compare the two for me.
Okay, yeah. So when you're, kind of the sole employee and owner of the business, everything is on you.
Hmm.
And it's hard to, I guess, not burn out because there's a huge
Hmm.
physical aspect as well as a huge mental aspect to it. And then how I
Hmm.
would, compare it to this arbitrage business is it's mainly mental, not very physical aside from setting up the apartments myself, which, is definitely not as taxing as fulfilling multiple details 7 days a week. But one thing that I definitely noticed the difference, and I personally really enjoy, is the aspect of, building a team and building relationships
Yeah.
with people. So I
Hmm.
would compare the two in the detailing business. You want to build a relationship with your clients, which obviously you want to do the same, but it's a little bit different, especially with Airbnb. A lot of the times you're only hosting a person once. They might, and I've had the experience where I've had people come back and stay with me a few times because they have recurring business in my market. But
Hmm.
the the team you're building is the people beneath you and beneath you figuratively. I don't
Hmm.
mean beneath you in any other kind of way, but you have your cleaners, your
Yeah.
handymen, the property managers and landlords that you work with. And that's would be the biggest difference, I would say, is like real relationships with real people. And I get a lot of enjoyment out of that, out of, nurturing those relationships and growing them.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point because like you probably learned a ton, like at least from my point of view, and I want to get your input on this as well. When you were kind of operating the detail business compared to like where you are now, running, leading up towards like a six-figure Airbnb portfolio, the difference between like building those skill sets and sharpening those tools to figure out how to hire, how to train, how to even fire, right? And do all of these things, was that kind of a new skill set that you tacked on to like your jack of trades, let's say, compared to like what you were doing prior to detailing? Because like yeah, you know how to detail cars, you know how to like maybe market a little bit from a basic standpoint, but now it's like now you're running a six-figure Airbnb business and you have to have a team under you to only work so many hours a week and actually make it worthwhile, let's say, you know what I mean? So what skill sets did you kind of sharpen or even like add on into your stack like as you kind of stepped into like the Airbnb business?
Yeah, absolutely. That leads perfectly into how I had a cleaner that, it just things weren't working out. She had tons of properties and I really wasn't the priority. So that was
Mm-hmm.
my first experience having to, I guess fire somebody. And that was honestly very tough for me because,
Yeah,
I have a bit of, people pleasing traits. So I
sure.
really didn't know how to go about that at first, and I had was lucky enough to have the one-on-one support and
Yeah.
bounce basically ideas on how to go about that off of you and Andrew. But so
Hmm.
that's definitely something I added onto my skill set was the hiring and firing and team building, how to treat
Hmm.
people, and I'd
Yeah,
say the biggest thing is how to give criticism to your employees without rubbing them the wrong way. Constructive
sure.
criticism.
Yeah, 100%. Totally. And for me, it's like, I know I kind of told you this when you were down here in Miami with me. It's all about like the company culture, right? Of building that company culture around your business, around your company, and like implanting the seed in your employees, in your cleaner's brain, and in their mind of like where you plan on taking the business and the company and like where you foresee it going. And like basically paint a picture in their head of like getting them to buy into you and buy into the company. And I think that's where so many entrepreneurs struggle, right? Especially like their first business of learning how to hire, fire, train, like all of these things is company culture. And that's built from like a position of leading a company, but then also, like you said, being able to give like constructive criticism without rubbing them the incorrect way. Right. And I think that's like super beneficial. So I'm glad you kind of brought that up. Let's talk a little bit about like where you are at specifically now. Like, obviously, we touched upon, you've been working with us for a little over 9 months now, going on 10 months. You're at 10 Airbnbs right now. Let's discuss a little bit exactly like where you are currently with the properties, how well you're doing and things of that sort.
Yeah, awesome. So, yep, like we said, I've been operating now for about 9 months, going on 10. I've been able to scale up to 10 Airbnbs, and I would completely give the all the credit to the huge points you make on building relationships. So all these properties are with the same management company. So, basically it grew to a point in a short 9 months where they were coming to me, hey, we've got these units available. Would you like to take them on? And that is
Mm-hmm.
all thanks to, learning how to properly run the business, keep the units in great condition, have
Mm-hmm.
treat the guests correctly so that, no
Yep.
issues are going on, be able to handle any issues that do go on. So yeah, so I've gotten to about 10 not about, I've gotten to 10 units now. doing
Hmm.
about anywhere, in a slow month to a high month between 4 and 10,000 in
Hmm.
net profit. My
Nice.
best month was October. We did about 26,000 in revenue.
Nice.
Um, and yeah, so it's been great since.
Yeah, it's so killer. And I want to kind of talk about this more because I think a lot of people have the misconception of like, everyone's showing the Airbnb numbers like on their main dashboard, and everyone's got to do it, right? Like revenues is a really important aspect in business. But like you mentioned, like you did $26,000 last month. That was your best month so far. And now we're really gathering data of like, okay, how to adjust our pricing in slow season of your market, the high season of your market, right? Pricing is a massive part of this business. Can you touch upon a little bit as far as like how much that usually is profit margin wise, maybe like percentage? You don't have to get like too technical, but like on like a basic, average month on a 12-month year, right? What is like your profit margins if you know off the top of your head as far as like let's just use October for an example last month. You did $26,000 in revenue. How much of that was actually profit?
About, let's say, well, I will get specific, everyone
Yeah,
deserves to, see how the business really does. So in that 26,000, I walked away with 11,500 in my own pocket. So,
nice.
I'm not the best mathematician. I don't know percentages
Sure.
off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. That's really good work. And as far as like now that you have been with us for some time, right? And now you're kind of like branching off, like you've been scaling on your own. You got to 10 units, pretty much of just leveraging the relationships you had, operating correctly, like you mentioned. Let's touch a little bit upon like what you felt like was the best aspect of working with us. Like what did you learn the most? What was the most helpful that allowed you to get to this position of where you are now of like going from like, yeah, maybe a business owner, but still an employee and working a ton of side hustles and side jobs to bring in capital to where you are now, like what was the most helpful like working with us here at the Arbitrage Empire?
Honestly, I would say everything in the course itself, I couldn't nail down to one specific thing that was the best help
Mm,
or, the most beneficial because everything in there, to backtrack a little bit, I was part of another program in the past, and
mm,
it's a different the one-on-one communication, and then just the program, the course material that you offer, just a night and day difference to what I had experienced in the past. But what I
mm,
was really getting at is, I would say the biggest thing that I, take from you guys is not even part of the course material. It's more so just, as cliche as it might sound, is, mindset things and kind of just
mm,
like, just do it.
yeah.
Like,
Hmm.
there's no secret. There's obviously little tips, tricks, hacks that you learn through the program, but
Hmm.
it's really just about, diving in and doing it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's a played a huge role into what helped me buy into this was knowing you and knowing your background and
Sure.
'cause, in a world of courses and all that you never know who to
Yeah.
trust. But yeah,
Hmm.
back to what I was saying is just really what I take away the most from you guys is just kind of like getting your hands dirty and learning
Hmm.
from experience.
Yeah, and I think it's very fair to say, like, I tell you this all the time, and like even our other clients and even potential clients that I meet with, it's like so many people have this bad rap on like courses and stuff like that. Obviously, we don't sell courses here, like you mentioned. We have a done for you program, one-on-one support, hand-holding process. But a lot of people did have a bad experience, like yourself. And we don't have to get into that, like for you personally, but a lot of people did kind of go through similar positions with other mentors, other programs, and got a bad taste in their mouth of like, okay, like, all programs are a scam and, I'm just going to stay away from this. It's not for me and things of that sort. But like, I always put in perspective and like, I have a funny analogy. It's like for you, right? When you're like going on dates and like you're meeting new women and things of that sort, like it's kind of funny. But like, if you go on a date with a girl, right? And you come home and like the date just didn't go that well. Like you and her didn't really click and, you didn't really mesh and whatnot. And you came home and like, we had a good dinner, but, you didn't really get much out of it. Well, you didn't like come home automatically and be like, that's it. Like I'm switching from looking to date girls and I'm going to start dating guys, right? Like that's not how it works, right? And for you, like I'm saying this because like you came from somewhere that you didn't have the best experience prior with a mentor, right? And you kind of kept searching because you knew someone was out there that would actually get you to where you want to be, right? So, what advice would you give someone? Because like you took that step, and of course you had the confidence to work with someone like myself because we had a previous relationship somewhat, right? But like what advice would you give to someone that is kind of scared to kind of take that leap? Because it is fair to say, right? It's very hard to kind of step into the unknown without confidence and certainty, right? That you're actually going to get results and you're actually going to get what you're told and all of these things. So, what advice would you give to maybe someone that is looking to get started in Airbnb, or maybe just trying to get involved in entrepreneurship? Like, what advice would you give someone to just take that first step and actually put the action in to get the results that they want?
Yeah, definitely. I guess you could say it's a cliche, but it's really just you don't know until you try. Like you're
Mhm.
gonna time is gonna pass. A way I like to think a lot when I'm dealing with thinking of a decision, trying to come up with a solution to something is the time between thinking of a solution and finding a
Mhm.
solution is gonna pass regardless. So
Yeah,
weighing out all these different scenarios isn't going to help. Figure out a plan of action and just go for it. And sometimes that plan of action is you don't have a plan of action. You'll figure it out as you go. But it's really
yeah,
just take the step. Like you really don't know until you try. And the whole time in the beginning, I didn't know how this was going to work. I'm setting up my first Airbnbs. I mean, I've set up all 10 by myself, but I'm setting those up and I'm like, you're always going to have those, doubts. And I'm
sure.
like, what if this doesn't rent out? And
Yeah,
if I let that hold me back, we wouldn't be on this podcast right now. I wouldn't have just, flown out to Miami. You don't
yeah,
know until you try. So my
yeah.
biggest piece of advice would just be take the step. Like, what's the worst that happens? You're working at McDonald's? Not that bad of a job anyway.
Yeah, I know. I know you said something super important, like always having the doubts, which I think is very common in entrepreneurship, right? But would you say, like, working with us and like when we were helping you pick the market and we were helping you as far as doing the market research and teaching you that process, that before you even signed your first lease and of course as you were growing and scaling, that through that process of us working with you of identifying how to do the due diligence and like I said, all those things, did that give you more of a certainty and more of a confidence behind like your action taking that like made you basically put one foot in front of the other and be like, you know what, like we have enough data that backs up like this unit is going to profit and this market is going to do well? Do you feel like that process that we took with you before you signed the lease like gave you that certainty to be like, you know what, like I have to take this, I have to take this risk and I have to step into the unknown and get this thing going?
Absolutely. Having people that are quote unquote professionals in the space present to you like a market that, I mean, first of all, it wasn't even like you guys came to me and said, hey, you have to go to this market or this isn't going to work. You gave me you listen to my opinions on where I wanted to, try to go, and then you advise me on what works and what doesn't. And,
Yeah.
getting, like I said, that professional background of market research and, what works, what doesn't work in certain areas, maybe
Mhm.
what size unit does better, go for a
Yeah.
one, maybe go for a two, you don't know. And
Yeah.
getting all that information from you absolutely gave me the confidence to dive in. And I will say, building off of that, as I've continued to be part of the program, what really gives confidence is the group calls, because I go into the group calls when I have questions. I do have my one-on-one support with Andrew. I have those calls weekly, but even if I don't have anything to ask, everything's going well that week, I still pop into those group calls because
Yeah.
you never know what you're going to hear somebody else ask or what's going to be brought up. And a lot of times when
Mhm.
there's some struggles you might be going through, somebody brings up that same topic and they're in a completely different market in a different part of the country,
Yeah.
but it kind of just like it eases the stress you'll have. You're like, oh, okay, they're going
Sure.
through that too. It's completely normal.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. It's a good point. Okay, cool. Talk to me, bro. What's like your plans for the future as far as scaling, like where you want to see yourself a year from now? Like talk to me about like some of your plans and what you got into fruition right now.
Yeah, so I will say that this past trip we just had down to Miami kind of fired me up. I was gonna sit back, maybe try to collect a little bit of profits, pay down some of that 0% debt I have. But after this trip, I'm like kind of open my eyes to what is possible with this business. So gonna
Yeah.
continue scaling right now, try to close out the year with another two or three properties, and then
Nice.
through 2026, plans to be at minimum 20 units by the end of next year, hopefully 25. That's the stretch goal. But
Let's go.
if I did 10 this year, no reason why I can't get another 10 next year.
Agreed. Agreed. And I think you absolutely like excelled your expectations. Honestly, I remember like when we first discussed, you're like, yeah, I'd like to get like 3, 5 properties in my first year, 2 years, and I think you pretty much like doubled your original goal, which is amazing to see. And as far as like discuss a little bit upon like how you're going to kind of take that into action, like okay, how you are going to get to 20 units, like. What does your specific day to day look like? Specifically, like right now, I know the holidays are coming up, but what is like that look like on your behalf as a business owner in the Airbnb space? Like, what does it actually entail getting to like 20 units, 25 units as your goal that you're setting for yourself by next year?
Yeah, perfect. So, I mean, I'll give it exact rundown. Like you said, we're going into the holidays right now. So, on a day like today, I'll check my pricing kind of first thing every day. You want to make sure everything is aligned so that, you're not scrambling for bookings or wondering when the next one's going to come in. You want to control all the things you can control, basically.
Yep.
So make sure your pricing's dialed in. And then, like we just said, the holidays are coming up. So it's a little tough to get a hold of landlords and whatnot. So building out my lead list right now for when, this week ends and we go into next week. And, I'm just going to hit the phones, keep dialing out in my market, see what I can get my hands on, hopefully land a few deals. Like I said, I hope to get at least two or three properties by the end of this year, which doesn't give us too much time, but it's definitely doable. And just continue that process to get to 20, 25 units, see what new landlords I can build a relationship with, see what properties
Hmm.
they have. If they've got more than one, that's kind of a little gold mine is something I've definitely taken away from this is looking for landlords. Obviously, you don't know until you reach out to them, but that have multiple
Yeah.
properties because you build a relationship with them. You kind of show them it's a win-win for both parties, and you can kind of scale with them, bring them onto your team.
Yeah. And it brings me to another good question before we kind of wrap this up. A lot of people have this misconception of Airbnb of like, why would a landlord or apartment complex or a property manager even allow you to do a sublet or allow you to take their property and list on short-term rental websites like Airbnb, Furnish Finder, VRBO, Booking.com, and whatnot? What would you say to those types of people? Like, why do you have 10 properties in your portfolio with a couple relationships and they keep calling you to take more properties? Like, what would you say to those types of people of like kind of skeptical upon like why would anyone let you, sublet their property? Can you talk to me a little bit on that?
Absolutely. So this is a huge question I had myself before I got into it, and even while I was in it before I had multiple properties. So basically, the main thing is these people that are either landlords, property managers, people that work within a company that might have 1,000 properties across the country, they're looking to get their vacant units filled. They have a rent price
Yeah.
for a reason. So if you're in there fulfilling their rent price, taking care of the unit, they're not looking to run an Airbnb business. There's way
Yeah.
more involved than just taking some photos and listing it on Airbnb. It's a whole
Yeah.
separate business. And on top of that, the average tenant is, they're not having a professional cleaner come into their apartment. That's kind of a luxury that most people that are,
Hmm.
renting the kind of apartments we target are not, splurging on. So
Yeah.
with our business model, after every reservation, we have our cleaning teams come in and do a professional deep clean of the apartment. So on top of us putting the rent price in that landlord's pocket, we're signing maybe even longer than the yearly lease, 2-year lease, maybe
Yep.
is 18-month lease. So we're keeping the rent in their pocket. We're keeping it, maintained, clean,
Hmm.
and it's a business for us. It's not
Yeah.
just an apartment.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. It's good. Okay, cool. While we're kind of coming to an end on this, two final questions I have for you. I want to kind of put something in perspective with you and kind of first off, like congratulate you, bro. Like I know you came down here. We were just together, kind of looking at some stuff on your Airbnb portfolio side of things and like your journey of where you started, where you are now. So first off, like congratulations. You've been absolutely crushing it, right? I know obviously um, we want to continue going, right? You want to get to 20, 25 doors and obviously onward. What would you tell yourself, like the Jake, a year ago, right? Before you started working with us, before started having 10 properties and doing all these things that you're doing now, what would you tell your past self a year ago with what you know today to kind of help you kind of take that step forward and step into the unknown? Like I keep saying, like what kind of insight and advice would you give the Jake, a year ago from now?
Honestly, I would say the first thing would just be, just keep doing what I'm doing.
Mhm.
Obviously, it's coming to fruition. It's worked out well. And honestly, I would probably tell myself to stress a little bit less because definitely had some unnecessary stress, worrying if things are going to work out, stuff like that. And it really is like what you put into it. So I would just tell
Yeah.
myself, you're not going to get out of it what you don't put into it.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like, so, like fitness is a huge part of my life. So I kind of attribute it to, I bring the two together. So it's kind of
Mhm.
like, in the sense of like putting on muscle, you're not going to just
Mhm.
naturally put on some muscle because you want to. You got to put in the work.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
you're not going to get the reward without putting in that work. It's really that
Mhm.
simple. So even just taking a little step each day towards what that goal that you have is really
Mhm.
it. So A lot of people, think they need to do everything all at once. Like, oh, I need to go get 10
Yeah.
properties next week. But it's not like that. And operating like that leads to burnout. So
Yeah.
really just putting one foot in front of the other, making small progressions each day, each week, it all really builds up.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, cool. And now, last question I have for you is like, and we kind of touched upon this, but I want to kind of get your perspective on this as well. What advice would you give to someone that, and this isn't even just goes for like Airbnb arbitrage for someone that wanted to start this, like, I'm talking about all business models out there, right? Things to get into to actually buy back your time and kind of create this own foundation for themselves. What advice would you give to someone, right, that's like kind of on the fence and like maybe has been thinking about it for years, right? They want to leave their 9 to 5 and do all of these things, or maybe just make an extra couple $1,000s a month that's going to allow them to take the vacations and allow them to live a little bit better lifestyle than what they do. So, like, what advice would you give to someone that may be watching this that's on the fence about taking that leap with what you know now? Because like you're a completely different person from like 10 months ago to where you are now. And like that's a pretty short time period of like building that business mindset and getting to where you are now. So with the skill sets that you've developed over the past 10 months, what advice would you give to someone in the mindset that you're in that's like kind of on the fence and scared to take that leap? It may be similar to like what you tell your past self, but like someone that is really scared and fearful to step into the unknown. With what you know today, what advice would you give them?
It kind of goes back to what I was saying before, and it might sound, a little woo-woo or whatever, but the time is going to pass regardless of what you do. If you stay at
Mhm.
your job that you hate, or you stay in a relationship that you hate, or whatever it may be, that time is going to pass regardless of if you want it to or not. So
Mhm.
put yourself in the shoes as best as you can as the future person
Mhm.
and just look at it from that frame. Like, you can stay the same and nothing is going to change, because if you don't make changes, no one's going to do it for you. Unless you're 5 years old, nobody's coming to save you. It's a cliche,
Yeah.
but it's the truth. So
Mhm.
really just think of your future self and where you want to be and do your best to envision that person and
Mhm.
kind of work backwards from there. Maybe
Mhm.
if this is what you need to do, write out a list. What are the steps you need to take to get to that person? Work backwards. There's all your action steps. It's really that simple. It's really just
Yeah.
about doing it.
Dude, that's such good advice. And yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned something like as we wrap this up, it's like if you don't change, nothing's going to change, right? And so many people, it is cliche to say, and I think pretty much everyone and their mother knows that, right? But when they come to an opportunity that they're facing, the difficult part is not knowing that they need to change, but it is making the change, right? And there's a difference between knowing and doing, right? And that's where I feel like so many people do struggle. And I'm glad you kind of brought that up because it is super important of like not just knowing what you need to do, right? But actually doing it, right? Because that's actually what's going to get you the results that you want and you're looking for. So that's good stuff. Listen, I appreciate it, Jake. Thanks for coming on, kind of sharing and telling us your journey of like where you were prior to working with us, even prior to getting into Airbnb, right? And what you were doing before then, and kind of sharing us your journey of like where you are now, what you've learned, what advice that you've taken, not only just from Andrew and myself, but advice from your or learning about yourself through this process, which is also super important. So I appreciate you kind of sharing your perspective on that and keep crushing. All right, bro.
Thank you, man. Appreciate everything you guys have done for me.
Absolutely, brother. Keep killing it.